It's going to be a lot of work, but let's just get into that deal instead of sit on the sidelines and just keep making excuses like, well, we can't compete with cash. Just we were done with that. So took about a year and a half to get into our first deal. And then once we bought that park, our strategy was to make a list. We made a list of every single park in like a 3 to 5 mile radius. And we said, there is really no competition around here.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Soar, continuing the conversation today with our guest, Jason Postill. You would have heard him yesterday, talk about the transition from a professional baseball player to commercial real estate and a number of things that he wished he had known or done differently. But I was thankful he was willing to share a number of those things with us, because I think it applies to all of us, whether you're still in your JOB, hoping to move to something else or become an entrepreneur, or even if you're a passive investor, there's going to be things that apply to you. Today, we're going to dive more into his deal pipeline and what that looks like and why and how he's finding deals, and specifically in mobile home parks as well. Some things that and how consistency has paid off for him in a number of areas. You're going to learn a lot from him today. Jason, welcome back to the show. Honored to be able to continue the conversation with you and dive back into your superpower and the thing you love to do every day. I love talking about those things because that's where people get really passionate, right? And something you just eat and drink. It's like the things you love to read about and do on Saturday morning, right? It's like you don't even have to be paid often to do those things, but thankfully there's ways we can be. And so but I want to remind the listeners that go back and listen to yesterday's segment. If you didn't, Jason highlighted his path really to commercial real estate, and from being a professional athlete to being a professional real estate investor, right? And many things in between that he wished he had known years ago that he wanted to share with you then. So please listen to that yesterday. And today we're going to dive back into and how he's finding those deals and really from off market to systems and things like that. So Jason, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Whitney. Really appreciate it. Excited to talk through the deals. So,
yeah, let's do it. Well, let's talk through your acquisitions process a little bit. Obviously I feel like you kind of get to cheat a little bit because you're a broker as well. Is that right?
That's true. You definitely can look at it that way. Absolutely. That is one way to look at it.
Hey, I could go get my broker's license too, I guess, right? So I'm just joking with you, but well, let's talk through your acquisitions process a little bit. How are you finding deals, and what are you looking for? And let's jump in.
Yeah, awesome. So and yeah, the licensing definitely helped with the education, right? But for the listeners, obviously you don't need a license when you're syndicating or buying your property, right? You go direct to the owner, off market, right? Those are where the best deals typically are. Not saying broker, I am a broker, a licensed broker, so I'm not saying broker deals are bad, right? And and I'll back up, but with that being said, once brokers do realize like, hey, these guys buy, they close, they will bring you off market deals. So we still leverage brokers, even being a broker. And we'll touch on that later, but yeah, we're our strategy's direct it to owner. I'm still making the cold calls a lot of times. I know we talked a little bit about that on the last show, but we've done so many things. So I'll share what's worked, and I'll touch on really everything, because just because it didn't work for myself yet or at this point doesn't mean it's not going to work for someone else. So is that a good place?
Sounds great. Sounds great. Let's do it.
Awesome. So we buy mobile home communities. That's what we buy. We syndicate mobile home communities. Again, the brokerage, we do have the brokerage arm that is general commercial, because for example, we purchased a deal a year ago, and the owner's like, wow, you guys are legit. Do you want to, he saw we closed, we did everything we said. He said, hey, well, I have an assisted living center. Do you guys want to buy that? And we said, no, we don't buy, we don't operate those. But having that ability and buyer pool of just knowing maybe where to take that to get some compensation, we were able to facilitate that sale, and guy down in Palm Beach, quick close and nice commission check, that we ended up putting in a deal. So, that has been helpful. And some guys do wholesaling, and that's a great business in itself. But we buy mobile home communities. So the way we've done it in 2020, we bought our first park, and it was a 68 unit 2-park portfolio. That was actually a broker contact. We ended up in Arkansas. I think I mentioned briefly on the last show, we were getting our tail kicked down here in Florida. We just couldn't make sense at a 4 or 5 cap, quick cash closing. It just we could not compete, especially with zero track record. So we ended up, and I keep saying my business partner is actually going to be on your show as well. He's operations on the ground. He's an animal. So that'll be a great show to listen to with Tyler Likas. But we had a broker contact that had a kind of wild hair out in middle of Arkansas, and it was off market. And we purchased that. It was a owner financing, and it was a great deal. It was in a rougher part, but again, that lesser competition, maybe we thought, hey, this is a really good deal. It's going to be a lot of work, but let's just get into that deal instead of sit on the sidelines and just keep making excuses like, well, we can't compete with cash. Just we were done with that. So took about 1.5 years to get into our first deal. And then once we bought that park, our strategy was to make a list. We made a list of every single park in like a 3 to 5 mile radius. And we said, there is really no competition around here. Nobody's calling in these markets. Mom and pops own these for 30 years. Baby boomer, 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day. Like, they're tired of this. They're very tired of these. So I just ended up calling, and I do this during due diligence when we have a park. So this is a good little exercise too, when you're doing rent surveys, rent comps. And so we just made a list. So whether you use Excel, we use CRM. There's a million of them, right? We use deal pipelines, but it's
deal pipelines. Is that a CRM for acquisitions?
Yes. So it's a pipeline where, and they have so many tools now, right? Where you can have ringless voicemails. We've probably all got them, right? But they work. They actually work. And I'll touch on that ringless voicemail. Because I just thought that was some spammy thing that would never work, because we all get them and we're like, this delete. But if you just say, hey, I got an Excel spreadsheet, I don't have a budget for all of these fancy softwares and widgets and all of this, CoStar and all these tools, you can do it. That's why I show my agents. I have the resources, obviously, but I'm like, look, if you have nothing else and you're in a laptop somewhere random, there's ways to do this literally with the free resources available on the internet. And so if you just have an Excel spreadsheet, we've literally made a list of every property and we got the address. All this is public records too. You can find the entity, and then you go to the SEC states and find who owns that entity. And then there's even free phone number search lookup if you don't have fancy subscriptions, white pages. So, and I just hammered the phones, just literally one by one. And then since they weren't getting called that much, when they heard our price point, we thought it was a steal, when they thought it was like a joke. Like, they're like, you'll pay this for that? And we're like, 250,000 for 22 spaces? Yeah, like that does. We're like, what? And they're thinking this thing, I'm like, what do you think it's worth? That's always the question, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, rule 101 of negotiating, you never make the first offer. But so we created these win-wins. It's not like we were robbing these people, taking them for advantage, but it just works so well to just literally direct hit on a phone. We didn't even have to roll out a mail campaign yet. And that was later on another piece. But really the strategy, maybe a lot of people don't want to hear, oh, great, I got a cold call. But I'm telling you, if you're in these markets, even the guys that are cold calling aren't hammering the phones all day, every day. And so if you're making those calls consistently, even if a guy is making 200 calls a day and he flames out and you're just doing 10, 20 a day for the long term, you're going to win in the end. And it's proven now that 3 years later, we're actually getting inbound that, hey, and I'll still make my weekly follow-up call or a couple weeks. So I'm not really just, that they'll still answer, but they appreciate it too at some point, because it's not always like, hey, you want to sell. It's bringing some sort of value too. So that is the other piece of that call, is some market information. Like what can you what can you share with them other than just trying to take all the time? Nobody wants that. So that
That's a
anyway,
great
that was one.
idea. Great. And I don't think that's talked about very much. It's like, man, okay, you saw an article, somewhere that you learned something from or whatever, and you share that with them as something that, they probably would like to know as well, as opposed to just asking them if they want to sell.
1,000%. And everybody's busy. So they're not reading all the time what's happening there. And really they're not, especially in mobile home park land, they're not in tune. Like they're not seeing what's or not to like discredit them, like they're not sophisticated, but they're not seeing what's trading out there in the market at these cap rates, or where's all the velocity happening. And so when you can share like, oh, hey, our rents here, or I'd like to share rents, or you bring some sort of value. Or yeah, it could be, hey, they're putting up a laundromat down the road. Did you know that might be good for your tenant base? Oh, no, I didn't hear that. That's great. Yeah, send out a newsletter. Let them know it's a place for that, just because, it's not talked about a lot. And it's really not said because everybody is just going for the jugular and trying to get the sale. So, and I've been guilty of that, really,
Do you feel
and
like
once
cold calling is like works well for mobile home parks, but maybe not for, say, high-end multifamily or, yeah.
high-end multi hyper competitive. So it is a way different call. It is just, again, for the multifamily guys. I know you got a big listeners out there in that space. And I've definitely called those, and yeah, they're getting 100 a day of just, oh, New York, and they're just getting blasted. So again, the value piece, even if there's creative at that point, it's like sending them something like a direct mail, like a bot, like a gift of some sort. Like you're just having to really be different, because really cold calling a 40 unit mobile home park in the woods in Arkansas, you might not have to send them a box gift because they're not getting as many calls. But yeah, it's definitely a different call, and you have to be a little more creative on that. But it's just, again, the consistency, because we actually just got a deal under contract, 200 sites, and that was 4 years. I was looking at all the offers we sent him over those past years, and we were just calling him. And finally, he just said, "I'm ready. I spent 100,000 on water lines. You boys have been around, and I trust you. Here you go." Like,
Wow.
and so
That's a
that, but
testament
that,
to your consistency, right?
and it's, yeah, and we only did one deal last year. It was a little slower year, right? But we're still getting operations, and maybe for a lot of people, it was a lot different stuff happening
For
out there.
sure.
But it was a good year, but it was the one deal we had, and that was 3 years calling this guy, and he actually got it under contract. A wholesaler got it, and then they couldn't assign the contract, and he came back. He goes, I had a bad feeling, but you got, and so we're now getting those, and those don't come early on. This is, again, 3-4 years, but it's of that consistency.
Yeah. Love
So
that. Just speaking to the consistency, and I've heard that in so many walks of life, or so many areas of my life, right? Just have to be consistent. Well, keep going through your process, or through the, from, okay, you got your Excel spreadsheet, or maybe your CRM, like you talked about, and you're making the calls. Keep going through that acquisitions process a little bit.
yeah, sure. So again, in that example about the verse 68, we ended up buying a portfolio. It was 5 parks, and that was from a direct, again, cold call. And at that point, we started making some relationships. So just to supplement some other leads, city officials, right? That was one strategy we ended up leveraging a little bit, because typically they hate mobile home parks. Like they want to condemn them, tear them down, and put up a nice A-class apartment building. Well, when they realized, okay, well, these guys are coming in, putting in new roads, some infrastructure, they're cleaning up, tearing down the bad homes, bringing new homes, it started giving us some other inbound leads. Like, oh, hey, go talk to Bill, the slumlord, whose park has 300 violations. And so that was one little strategy. I'm not saying that works all the time, but once you get into a market and start just connecting. But then we did start implementing a direct mailer. So once we made that list, right, we have all the complete ownership records, and there's different levels to it, because then you'll even get to where you have their birthdays, and then you're getting really personal with it. And I mean, I'll have guys make fun of, a Thanksgiving card. Oh, hey, I'm tired of seeing your guys' face okay, well, I won't put my face on there anymore. I get it. I'll just still send you a card. So we're in his head. So I don't care, it doesn't
right.
matter to us if he, hates our pictures or it's a joke, but but we're in their head. So the direct mail campaign, that has also worked. And these are old school strategies, right? I mean, all the AI and again, the ringless voicemail that actually has worked, but our best deals have came just from a direct either cold call, a direct mailer. And then we started, and this is again, just two guys, like me on the phones, hooking the meeting. If you are out of state or have a partner, we're doing this remote, or I am, and I'll go every quarter. So you don't have to do it in your backyard. If you're starting out and you're just solo, it's good to get in about a 30-mile radius of your backyard, because then you can go to those meetings, and the meetings are important to get some face time. So then we did start a acquisitions team, which this was what I was referring to, didn't work out super well, but I did, that's on me. I didn't fine tune it, and it might work great for some people. We use over in the Philippines, we have a 24/7 call center in Mexico City. That's more for like inbound. We have 700 units now across 16 communities. So, we were at one point answering the phones. It was wild. So there are resources overseas and even in the States, obviously, that we leverage now. But that'll work really well if you have a really good training process. So again,
I've always heard that man, I mean, I've used a ton of virtual assistants from all over the world as well for a lot of things, but not anyone who really had to talk to anybody. you know, uh, I mean, there's some skills there, right? There's a lot of skills that, especially just soft skills around being able to communicate well and reading the person you're talking to, right?
Exactly. And none of it's easy. So I don't want to discredit, if it's a flip, because I've seen scripts and different companies that set it up, and it's, maybe the flipper. So they're just literally making, hey, we want to buy your home for this. And it's a more basics, not trying to make an excuse for my lack of training, but there, once you get into cap rates and cash on cap, there is a handoff period, which, we were saying, hey, here's the basic script. And, there was some language barriers and some different things we were getting through. But again, it will work great. And it did drum up some warmer leads where then it's like, okay, now when I come into the office, I have working numbers. That's huge. Where it's like, if you just get a databaser that can just scrub your data and make sure you have accurate information, because sitting here calling for 2 hours, wrong numbers, isn't very productive, right? And it is in the sense of, well, now I'm cleaning up my data, but if you can pay someone much less than what you feel your hourly rate is, then clearly that's a good move. So I do recommend having some team. I haven't built that SOP out to have it dialed in very efficiently. And we're still working on our property management SOPs and policy and procedures. So once those are dialed in, it is a great resource. And I think that's where some volume can tick up. And it is a great resource
Where do you see, being able to say scale your acquisitions, moving forward? What are some focuses to be able to scale?
Yes, I mean, our goals, we want to get to 10,000 by 2030, right before there. So we got a long way to go. We're at we have 300 units under contract, which will get us over the 1,000 mark. So we got some deals to close, but we are now at the point where we are building. We vertically integrated our property management team. We do have some systems set up to scale now, and we've learned a lot over these last 16 deals, where now we know who to hire and when does a DM come in, and so that will help us get probably further a little bit quicker now, and raising the capital. So we have a lot of pieces still in the works, but we do feel now, obviously, the bigger deals, they're a little bit easier to manage. Our largest asset's only 122 units, and we won early on by picking up those 40 units, 20, 33, but those are tough to manage when you're in mobile home park land. $350 lot rent opposed to excuse me, maybe a 40 unit apartment building that's 1,800. It's a different number. So when we have a property management company, it's not a big profit center to support quality employees. So we're finally at that scale where it's like, okay, now we're hiring, giving some good salaries, and so that's going to help. And I don't know if that fully answered your question, but it'll help us
no,
get
that's
into
helpful.
larger assets. And now we are dealing with a little bit different ownership group, right? Instead of the mom and pop, there are still, I mean, the 200 site park we just got under contract, I meant that was a mom and pop. But there's very few of those out there at that size. So we are having a little bit different conversations for sure.
Sure. Wow. Well, Jason, I want to move to a few final questions of the show, and I ask everybody, especially in as experienced as you are in brokerage and all that, just your predictions, right, over the next 6, 12, 18 months in the real estate market, the economy. So I know none of us really or ever know the future, right? However, what we believe is going to happen affects what we do today. And so, what do you believe is going to happen next 6, 12, 18 months, and how is that affecting what you all are doing?
So yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough question because nobody's got the crystal ball. The good news, and anybody in a living, right, a multifamily, mobile home parks, affordable housing, that's that's always going to be in demand, right? So if excuse me, if the underwriting is very conservative, nobody could foresee the pandemic, nobody saw these interest rates coming, right? And the technical defaults that are out there that are coming. I think there's going to be big opportunity on that side for some operators that have maybe had some cash reserves, and that I believe is coming and arguably already here. But I think if the underwriting is always super conservative and more on like a management plan, right? I was told once too, a lot of guys out here maybe just operating off a pro forma, and we've realized now the last few years that's hard to just go off pro formas because it's of what's happened, right? So if you have a really good management plan, or even if you're using third party and you really understand theirs, then whatever happens in the future, not saying it's going to be all good, all right, because we don't know what could be down the pike, but I think just focusing on that, and again being very conservative and not these crazy pro formas, I think that'll help a lot of operators in the future,
Sure.
new investors or seasoned. So not sure if that quite hit your question, the
Yeah.
prediction.
No.
Um,
What would you say is your best source for meeting new investors and raising money right now?
That's one thing we're really working on, just growing our network. We've kind of been in operations, just really trying to hone in. We are putting a little more content out there now that we do have a pretty decent track record, but we've actually had some of our best, or not our best. I don't want to say best. It's not our best. Quite a few of our leads come from inbound on our existing portfolios. Even on the brokerage side, it's been just talking with people that are interested in the space and maybe looking for deals or interested in deals, and then just kind of sharing value, kind of going back to like the seller side. It's like when you're willing to just kind of share what's all going on and not really trying to get anything, it turns into maybe what you were looking for, but not directly, right? So I think the short answer to that has been just from being in the space, right? So whether that's being at some meetings, we're starting to go to a little more events now, and get out there, but it's just been sharing the good, bad, and even the ugly, because a lot of people don't share maybe some of the operational stuff that's a nightmare, and that gets people interest and say, wow, okay, well, they're not just going to talk about a 28% IRR or something, that they're going to share what's really happening out there. So just transparency, I guess, would be the short. Just
Yeah, I think that's wise. That's where people connect with you the most, right? When they see
Amen.
you're real.
That's right.
What are the most important metrics you track? Could be personally or professionally.
Yeah. So and I say I looking at deals. I'm fortunate to have a business partner that's very aligned. It's him and I. Fortunately, we don't have a whole lot of decision makers. So him and I have really been aligned. Even it's ironic. His goals at 10,000, mine 10. Like there's just like hard to find people that are aligned, and it's not always great. We bump heads, but talk through it. But one metric we really focus on is our cash on cash. The IRRs I keep throwing out there for the listeners, your internal rate of returns, that is a big number people look at, and especially institutions and even private investors. It's always talked about, the equity multiple, all that. And that's great. That is needed when you're putting together an offering, for sure. But again, with the interest rates, everything that's happened, it is still so subjective where those are going to be in 3, 5, 10 years. So for us, we look, what is our cash going into this deal? What is that cash coming back? And that cash on cash is going to be true, and it's not going to, it'll always change for the better or worse. But it'll be something in the near term where we really see, hey, how's this asset going to operate in the first 3 years? And especially, now that we control a market share, throughout Arkansas, we do know, hey, if market rents are here, we do feel confident in the first 90 days going here, and that cash on cash will be here that first year. And so that's a cash on cash is really the metric we focus on very heavily.
What's a habit you're disciplined about that has proven successful for you?
I've talked a lot about consistency and the phones. I'd love to say I make $50 a day. That's always my goal. 25 in the morning, 25, and that's not even a whole lot of calls, but it is a lot of calls for being busy like everybody else, right? So I would love to say that, but I think chipping away every day at something. Just making sure. And it's definitely not the calls. I have not been on the phones as heavily as I would even like to be, but just staying consistent and getting a little bit better every day. It's like, hey, did I push something forward today that was in the pile yesterday? And so I do like to say consistency, because it is tough in this business for again, those that don't know. I mean, a lot of these projects, if you're not taking a paycheck or on a salary, like, it's going to be a few years, 3, 5 years. And some of these guys coming in as syndicators might not, and I'm not saying it's always that way, but a lot of the projects we take on are heavy turnarounds, and it's a 3, 5 year window. And so just working and working and working and working when there's not some instant gratification, having that discipline is, I think, very important. And I think I got that's
no doubt about it. Yeah, and I think that's a great goal. 25 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon, and no doubt about it, that adds up over. I mean, even just a few weeks, much less months and months.
Yeah.
That's a lot of calls. Well, what about what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I give it to the big man up. God. Get too religious on here, but I know what you're. God fear man. So. That's it. Because I think too, being in business, having the competitive drive, that's number 2. But if you get into a point where, or I've got to a point where it's like, man, this is tough. Like, you can't even really have faith in yourself, which fortunately I've always had the confidence and like, hey, I'm going to get through this, even if it's not looking good. Like, I'm going to keep going and going and going and going. But yeah, God, having that faith has always helped me. No matter what, good, bad situation, just having that, if no one else is there, right? If you don't have a great business partner working their tail off, or, family behind you, which I do, I have all that, but, that's been number 1. And just, the competitive drive. I think that's been huge, because I hate losing more than I like to win, so it's like, man, if we're, if I just continue to get crushed, that eats at me. So I like to win. I like to win. But winning doesn't feel good if you don't have those losses, right? So they're important too.
How do you like to give back?
So again, church is number 1. But I've just now it is still hard for me to have young guys, or not hard for me. I love it, but like, just the goals I have and where I'm at to like be viewed as like a mentor is still for me like, well, you might want to talk to someone else, which I never do. I always try to pour into these guys, because again, going back to 22, 23, 24, 25, in my 20s, being in those buses, long trips, minor leagues, just not heading the right path. I really enjoy giving back. Like, hey, here's some knowledge, whether you take it or leave it. Like, because I heard that one thing literally just changed my direction. So now if I can just pour it out a little more, that's definitely a good feeling. So I'm looking more towards some other ways I can get involved. I remember at church last week, they were talking about the baseball team over where I live was doing something good. So I am going to get more involved in that, but anytime I can, guys will email me or call me, and I love that. If I'm getting cold called, I love it now. I'm just like, man, this guy is the best. Like, I'm not going to be rude. I'm going to give him a little time and see if I can help. But
that's awesome. Yeah, it's oftentimes if somebody asks me questions like as in mentoring them, like, am I old enough to be a mentor? I'm like, yeah, I guess so.
I just can't wrap my head. Yeah, I was like, no, let's call it something else. Like,
oh, wow. Yeah, Jason, grateful to have you on again and continue the conversation and dive into how you are successfully finding deals and I mean, just the consistency, the importance you place on consistency and how that's paid off for you. I feel like in a number of ways, but specifically in this segment, talking about finding deals, right? Projects that work for you guys. And I mean, even setting those goals of how many calls you're making a day and even using other sources or ways that you're tracking and following up, and even 3 years later, right, getting a deal from those calls. That's incredible. That should be encouraging too, to keep that going, right? Because you never know. Well, Jason, thank you again. How can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
I'm always on the email, jason@mhcigroup.com, or you can find me, mhcigroup.com is our little outfit here, and I'm not too hard to find. So always welcome the conversations.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.